After studying this module, you shall be able to know what are the charred and torn documents, how to preserve charred and torn document, and the decipherment of charred and torn documents. Within the wide field of forensic science, the scientific examination of documents has one purpose: to provide information about the history of a document for the benefit of a court of law, or before that to an investigating police officer or other agent seeking evidence that might be presented in the document. The same philosophy that prevents forensic science applied to document examination. The application of scientific methods and techniques to the problem relevant to the situation. The charred documents and torn documents are very important in some cases. Many times there are cases of charred document. These cases have been reported in which the act of arson was done just to destroy the important documents. The culprits usually find an easy way to destroy the evidence in the form of document is to burn them. Although a charred document by definition doesn't mean fully burnt document, it only means the partially burnt documents. The documents which are burned partially in the act of burning are charred document, and these documents can be reverted back to readable form if the paper method and expertise is applied.
Charred document. The handling of charred document requires extraordinary care. Even though examination of charred document seldom occur, the forensic document examiner and investigator should have a basic understanding how to collect and transport this delicate evidence to the forensic laboratory. Charred papers vary in physical composition and are burned under many different conditions. The composition of the original paper has much to do with the fragility of the charred fragment. To avoid unnecessary breakage, it is advisable to treat all charred documents as though they were of the most fragile type. The collection technique should be well thought out and not a rash decision. Some of the burned document may be pliable, while others will fall apart at the slightest touch. Charred document found in a safe or storage box should not be removed from the container. Due to their fragile state, it is recommended that the evidence should be transported to the forensic document examiner as soon as possible. Prior to transporting, cotton wool or other quenching material should be packed between the documents and the sides of the container. Loose documents require an additional set to limit or prevent breakage. If stacked, they should never be separated into individual pieces. Instead, it is best to use a spatula to slightly lift the delicate evidence up and slip a pie, tin or similar piece of tin metal or stiff cardboard underneath. In some cases, a large pen can be used if the mass of charged document can be moved safely without causing further damage. The pen is then placed inside a stir-by box, and packing material is used to hold it securely in place. Flat-bladed tweezers are recommended. Two gently placed single piece in a flat box or pen to protect them from damage. The characteristics of charred document are: the documents become black due to heat. The edges of the document become curled. The documents become fragile. Due to the fragility developed, the document may break into pieces even by a small amount of pressure. The charged document always have a point during its burning period at which the return material is clearly seen, and at that time the photograph of the document should be taken if possible. Next is the torn document. The torn documents are quite different from the charged document. As the name suggests, the document is torn into pieces, and the proper identification of the torn document is dependent on the number of pieces available from the total number of pieces and its arrangement as in a puzzle. The torn documents are generally found in cases of suicide where the family members want to hide this fact that the death was suicidal in nature. The torn documents are also seen for the edges or the direction in which it has been torn, and it also requires restoration like the charged documents. The documents which are torn have the following characteristics. The documents which are torn are always available in the form of pieces. The edges of the paper should be looked for if any specific area has been torn or not. The torn pieces of the documents should be collected and tried to arrange it properly. After the pieces are arranged properly, it should be photographed and then they are restored. The charged documents are more difficult to restore than the torn documents because there is very much difficulty in the process of collecting and transporting the charged document. The charged document is in very bad condition, but it can be stored. Next is protection and transportation of the charged document. Charged document should be picked with great care by putting a hard paper underneath. Since the charged documents are fragile and light-weighted, so at the time of lifting it should be protected from the air. For transportation to the expert, it is placed in a special kind of cardboard box known as the corrugated box, in which there are layers of cotton and tissue paper on which the charged document is placed. The charged document should be put very carefully in the corrugated box without any breakage. The topmost layer of this corrugated box consists of cotton so that the document does not break during transportation. The corrugated box should be labeled and sealed with all the necessary details like date and time of evidence collection, place of evidence collection, signature of IO, and two witnesses, number of evidences in one box, etc. There is arrangement of layers in the corrugated box, and it should be remembered while placing the charged document into the box that it should be put along with the cardboard or any hard paper with which the charged document was picked up. Next is stabilization of charged document. The most difficult part of the operation begins when the charged material reaches the laboratory. Here, the separation and segregation of the documents takes place. Again, it is found that individual conditions govern the best procedures to be used. Documents burned in a closed vessel react differently from those burned in the open air, depending upon the number of documents and their proximity to one another, as well as the extent of charring. They adhere or are easily separated. If closely bound together, they may vary, remain fairly flat, whereas singly, the fragments tend to curl and twist. Obviously, it is of paramount importance that these papers be separated with the least amount of damage to the individual documents. And this is not an easy task, especially when the documents are found in a twisted, shrunken mass of closely packed paper. In most cases of documents, charge is a mass. It is possible to separate the individual papers without restoring to liquids, solvents, or other chemical means. In a case handled by John F. Tyrrell, associated of the writer, only manual methods were used for separating documents found in a strong box. The main problem in the deciphering of the charge document is its fragility. It is that much fragile that it cannot be handled with the hands. So, the first step in deciphering of the charge document is to make it stable for reading or deciphering the matter on the documents. There are number of ways which have been in use for the stabilization of the charged document. One of them is placing the charred document in the wet moisture chamber for several hours and for the spraying of the plasticizers and stabilization. The plasticizers used can be cellulose acetate solution in acetone or some other like the polyvinyl acetate solution in acetone. But there are various pros and cons of every plasticizer materials used. The cellulose acetate is a good plasticizer, but it cannot be used as regular material here, hence it cannot be spread well, which is one of the main characteristic of the stabilizing agents. Gum essica is another material which can be used for the purpose of stabilization of the charged document, but it has a bad property of sticking the glass on which the charged document is placed with the charged document. Moreover, the spraying property of the gum essica is also not good. The third and most preferable is the polyvinyl acetate. Either it can be spreaded or applied with the help of a glass rod to whole of the paper with constant pressure and uniformity. Before the application of polyvinyl acetate, the glass surface should be polished with 1% of silicon type water repellent substance in petroleum ether. Due to this silicon type water repellent substance, the charred document does not get bound to the glass on application of the polyvinyl acetate. Thus, the document can be lifted with ease after being stabilized by stabilizing agent. The polyvinyl acetate solution is made in acetone, which gets evaporated after application. After this step, stretching powder of the paper is gained to some extent, and thus it can be preserved for deciphering the content of the document either between two perspex sheets or between two glass pieces. This is how a humidifying chamber looks like. Now, let us learn about torn documents and its preservation. Torn documents are already in pieces, so as if there is no fear of its breakage, as in case of charred documents. Torn documents, as the name indicates, are torn in pieces. It is mainly done to hide some fact from the investigating agencies. The important thing during the analysis of the torn document is the recovery of each and every piece of document. The preservation of torn document depends from condition to condition, like if the pieces of the torn documents are big enough, they can be placed in a poly bag and then it a box, or if the pieces are very small, they can be placed in a small box and then in a poly bag and then again in larger box. While preservation of the torn document, it is necessary to look for any fingerprints on the pieces of paper, which can lead us to the suspects. All the information regarding the evidence should be written on the box, which is then transferred to the expert. Let us know about Deciphering the charred and torn documents. First is deciphering the charred documents. During the process of burning, there are many points at which the return matter on the documents can be seen. So, at those points, we should get the photograph of the document done. When the fragility of charred documents is less, or if it can be strengthened up by hand, then it is placed after getting it strengthened up on the negative photographic film. The return material on the document, which is corresponding to the negative film, gets developed on the negative film by the process of fogging. So, the exposed negative can be developed by the simple process of negative film development, and then the return matter can be easily deciphered. In charged document, the return matter is generally unaffected and can also be deciphered by ultraviolet or infrared photography. Now let us see deciphering of torn documents. The torn documents are deciphered in different manner, and it can only be deciphered correctly if we get all pieces of torn document. All the pieces should be spread on a large table, and it should be taken care of that there should be no air which can blow off the pieces. Then the pieces are joined to each other like in a puzzle according to their geometrical shapes. After joining all the pieces correctly, a photograph should be taken in normal light. Then the pieces are joined with gum essica, or can also be preserved between two sheets of perspex as in charred document for further examination. The other important factor which should be remembered during the analysis of the torn document is that it may contain the fingerprints of the culprit. So, any such evidence should be looked for. For purposes of clarity, the procedures for deciphering charred document have been placed in two general categories: photographic, those procedures requiring pure photographic techniques, and visual, those processes in which the documents are first visually inspected and then the contents tabulated or photographically reproduced. The primary usefulness of most visual processes is to decipher large numbers of charred documents, an effort that would be too expensive and time consuming by photography alone. However, in specific instances, photography can be and is used to record the results of visual decipherment efforts.
Summary: the charred document and torn documents are very much important in some cases. Many times there are cases in which the charred document gets burnt up. The documents which are burned partially in the act of burning a charred document, and these documents can be reverted back to readable form if the paper method and expertise is applied. The characteristic of the charged document are: the documents became black due to heat, the edges of documents become curled, the document becomes fragile. Due to the fragility developed, the document may break into pieces even by a small amount of pressure. The charred document always have a point during its burning period at which the return material is clearly seen, and at the time of photograph of the document should be taken if possible. Charred documents should be picked with great care by putting a hard paper underneath the charred document. For transportation to the expert, it is placed in a special kind of cardboard box known as corrugated box, in which there are layers of cotton and tissue paper on which the charred document is placed. The main problem in the deciphering of the charged document is its fragility. It is that much fragile that it cannot be handled with the hands. So, the first step in deciphering the charged document is to make it stable for reading or deciphering the matter on the documents. There are number of ways which have been used for the stabilization of charged document. One of them is placing the charged document in the wet moisture chamber for several hours and spraying of the plasticizers for stabilization. Torn documents, as the name indicates, are torn into pieces. It is mainly due to hide some fact from investigating agencies. The important thing during the analysis of torn documents is recovery of each and every pieces of document. The preservation of torn document depends from condition to condition. Like, if the pieces of torn documents are big enough, they can be placed in a poly bag and then in a box, or if the pieces are very small, they can be placed in a small box and then in a poly bag and then again in a large box. In charged document, the return matter is generally unaffected and can also be deciphered by ultraviolet or infrared photography. In cases of torn document, all the pieces should be spread on a large table, and it should be taken care of that there should be no air which can blow off the pieces. Blow off the pieces. Then the pieces are joined to each other like in a puzzle according to their geometrical shape.